Hi, I'm Don Rittner.
And I'm Justina Kostek.
Today we're going to explore the village of Sharon Springs, which is in upstate New York along the Great Western Turnpike.
Sharon Springs was once a thriving resort with thousands of visitors each year.
So let's find out why. Come along for a ride on
History on the Road.
The Great Western Turnpike, now part of historic Route 20, is one of the oldest turnpikes in America, and it was chartered in 1799. The Great Western went from Albany, New York to Cherry Valley, New York, a distance of almost 60 miles.
Several communities developed along the turnpike, including Guilderland, Duanesburg, Esperance, Sharon Springs, and Cherry Valley.
Today we're going to stop at Sharon Springs, a village of a little more than 600 residents, and it's located in Schoharie County in upstate New York. 100 years ago, the Sharon Springs population would grow to over 10,000 people in the summer because of its famous mineral springs.
Used by Native Americans for centuries, the early Europeans who settled here found the healing qualities of the mineral waters included sulfur and lithium, as well as other minerals, to be medically beneficial.
At one time, there were more than 70 hotels and boarding houses to welcome families from all over the world. Now there's only a handful to accommodate today's visitors.
Sharon Springs, however, is a magical little village with a great history and interesting people. We're going to interview a few of them. There are many historic markers throughout the village where you can learn about the fascinating history of Sharon Springs.
There's an assortment of architectural types and artifacts in the village, like this old bell made by Mindy and Kimberly in Troy, New York. This company produced church bells from 1870 to 1880. Mindy went on to produce over 100,000 bells, many of them still ringing across the country.
Throughout the village are reminders of Sharon Springs' heyday that are now slipping away due to the fate of time, like this swimming pool now being filled in with vegetation.
To get a better understanding of the village's history, we're going to talk to Ron Kettleson, the village's official historian and owner of the historic Roseboro Hotel.
So Ron, we understand that Sharon Springs was a very popular destination in the 1930s. Can you tell us why?
Well, actually, Sharon Springs was popular long before the 1930s. And before it was called Sharon Springs, it was called New Dorlock. And it was actually founded in 1797. And this was inhabited by the Iroquois Indians, who were very prevalent in this area. They discovered the healing qualities of the waters. And that was the beginning of what brought people here. There was a man who was a medical doctor by the name of Sebastian Fonda. He came to Sharon Springs, became friends with the Indians, and he learned all about the waters. So he wrote a book called The Healing Waters of Sharon Springs. And it went, what we'd call today, went viral. And so people from all over Europe started coming. And this was back in about 1850. Wow. And so even back in that day, it started to gain popularity. The first hotel in Sharon Springs was actually built in 1925. And that was right across the street on the corner of Main Street and Washington Street. And that was built by the Eldridge family and David Eldridge. And so that was the first hotel. It was followed by a number of other hotels. The Pavilion Hotel was the premier hotel. This hotel was located on Pavilion Avenue. And it had a whole series of columns in front of it. This was actually furnished, with amazing furniture. It was just beautiful inside. And this is why it attracted all the rich and famous to come here. And one of the rich and the famous was the Vanderbilt family. And the man with the hat is Cornelius Vanderbilt. And this is taken up on the steps of the Pavilion Hotel.
A New York Times reporter wrote in his column in 1849, "My home is the Pavilion, which is the present home of more beauty and fashion and gaiety that can be found. The most prominent members of the Upper 10 of New York City are here for the season. Who were some of these Upper 10? It included many of the rich and famous. U.S. Presidents Martin Van Buren, Ulysses S. Grant, Theodore Roosevelt, Franklin D. Roosevelt, and the Vanderbilts. Also included were Charles Dickens, James Fenimore Cooper, Oscar Wilde, and the Macys of New York City. Van Buren took spa treatments for his asthma, while Grant took them for his cancer. Teddy Roosevelt took inhalation treatments for his breathing problems. Franklin Roosevelt took them for his paralysis. Ironically, Mary Gardner, the Gardner heir, who owned the Pavilion Hotel, was a staunch Republican. And she said if Franklin Roosevelt won a third term as president, she would tear the hotel down. He was elected, and she did tear down the Pavilion in 1941.
But the hotels started to become more and more plentiful, and as they did, people originally came to Sharon Springs by stagecoach, and then later we added the train, and up at the top of the hill we have a depot, and it's still there today. And people would come in, and then all of the hotels had their own carriages that would pick up the people. So it had their names on it, and you would arrive by train, and then you would find the carriage, and then the carriage would bring you down the hill, and you would stay at the hotel. But this hotel, or they claimed that the waters would cure anything.
Ooh.
And
That's what I need, you see.
Oh, yes. Well, I have this water bottled up front, and I'd be happy to sell some to you.
Oh, please.
Yes,
I
yes.
will buy it.
They claim they came in like that and left looking like that, so.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Well, let's do this, Don.
Yeah.
The moment they reopen, we're gonna do this.
We had a lot of famous people that came here. We had presidents that came here. When they would come with their whole entourage. They would bring their horses, their dogs, their maids, the whole entourage. And they would have fox hunts. It was really quite a popular destination. And as you may have heard, Oscar Wilde came here, and was kind of one of our more famous people. But then it kind of died down, and it was popular from about 1850 till about 1930 is when we started to see a little bit of the decline. And that was due to the fact that they had started to have a development in medical technology, discovering penicillin, the development of new roads. This used to be the main throughway that came through the area, so we had a lot of traffic coming through here. So that brought a lot of people. And then it kind of died down, and it wasn't until after the Holocaust, when the Germans sent the Jewish people to the United States to be rehabilitated. Sharon Springs was one of the only places that would take the Jewish people, and the government would pay to have these treatments done, the medical treatments, and they loved to come to spas. And so for every person that came here, they would get remuneration. So it became very popular, and at one point we had 10,000 people that would come and spend their summers here. So there became a huge demand for housing and for temporary housing, particularly in what we call the short season of Sharon Springs, which would be about from April till maybe about September. And they would come up here, they'd bring the whole family, spend their summers here, either at hotels or in rooming houses. And so we had a tremendous amount of boarding houses and hotels here.
I was looking at the Sandboard insurance maps from like the 1920s.
Yes.
And everywhere I looked on the map, there was a hotel.
Yes.
So it seemed like there must have been, 50, 100 hotels?
I don't know at the peak time how many, because some of them were a combination of a hotel or, they weren't, they were boarding houses, so there was really no definition between the hotel and the boarding houses, but they, most of them were destroyed by fire, and back in those days they heated with wood and with kerosene, and they had their oil lamps, and they'd get knocked over and catch fire. So we lost many hotels to fires. There was a particular hotel right across the street, the Mansion Hotel, a very prominent hotel. Actually, there's some rumors that They used to do backroom, gambling back there, and during Prohibition, there was a private room in the back for, yes. So it was quite a unique community.
Yes.
So, but yes, unfortunately, we lost a lot of the hotels to fire. And then over time, as the Jewish people started to not come here, the kids grew up, the parents started to get older. They didn't bring the kids anymore. The kids didn't want to come. And so it became less and less a Jewish community. It was actually a very large Hasidic Jewish community. And you would see the guys with the hats and the curl, and they would just, be up and down the street. And they said if you didn't, one of the guys I talked to said if you didn't start garbage collection by 5 a.m, you could not get through the streets. So that's how busy Sharon Springs was at one point. And then it sort of went through a second phase where it died out again. And it went from this hotel, the Roseboro Hotel, last operated as a hotel in 1968. So many of the properties in like the mid 60s to 70s started to close, and there was a real decline. And they were left unattended, and many of the owners were from New York City or New Jersey or other places, many from Florida. They just left the properties, so they started to deteriorate. And so, like the Union Hotel across the street just started to deteriorate to the point where they'd had to be torn down. So it was very unfortunate that we've lost either hotels to fires or to, lack of care, and it's very expensive to maintain an old building. This particular hotel, the Roseboro Hotel, was actually built in 3 different pieces. So there's a wing which is on this side, which is currently the ballroom. That was actually built in 1850, and that was a private home. It was the Rosenbergs had a house, and it was just a 1.5-story house. And then the Hollands built a house over here on the other side, and that was built as a private residence as well. And then as the business started to pick up in Sharon Springs, in 1888, they built this middle wing, which was called the Rosenberg Hotel. So it wasn't originally called the Roseboro, it was called the Rosenberg Hotel. And then in 1900, a man by the name of Harry Wasserman from Florida came up, and he bought this property. And when he bought this, he didn't buy just this, he bought the whole, what we call today a compound. There's 15 acres of the downtown that's part of this. And he also, that included the Union Hotel across the street. He started to connect the whole property together. So he added the additional stories. He added so there's now like 5 floors in the front side. He put in a lot of modern, this was the first hotel that had sprinkler systems in the area. It had the first elevator, a 1930 Otis elevator in the front. It's still there today, and it's still operational, but it was the kind that has a lever that you had to have somebody operate, that little elevator boy. But it became a very prominent Jewish hotel. So as many of these hotels were. So in the back, it had 2 kitchens. There was the kosher kitchen and the regular kitchen, and the two, they couldn't mix, and so they had to have separate dishes, separate, and many of the hotels were that way. A lot of the other hotels had or more of the rooming houses had self-contained units. So you could come in, you could stay there. They would have a stove and a refrigerator, so a family could come and spend their whole summer there, and they could cook in their rooms, and so it was different levels of accommodations. So when this was done, this hotel, when he had finished building it and adding all the additional stories, there were 135 rooms, but when it was originally built, there were no bathrooms. So it wasn't until about 1925 that they added the first bathrooms, and those were here in the lobby. And then in 1930, they started to add these little bump out parts on the side of the hotel, and they put bathrooms there. And so there's only 23 bathrooms for 135 people. So what they used to do was all share baths, and they would, or bathrooms. And there used to be, the space was at a premium because they wanted to sell as many rooms as they could. So the bathrooms were nothing but a toilet at the end of this very narrow room. There was a sign on the door that says, please limit your time to no more than 10 minutes. And I always laugh and say, I wonder who enforced that. But yeah, but they all went over to the bath, and they would take their baths over at the bathhouse. Most of the hotels here had a doctor on staff. They would come here because they would claim these waters would do all kinds of things, everything from heart ailments to rheumatoid arthritis, stomach issues, all kinds of things. So they would come here, they would meet with the doctor, he would prescribe treatment, and then they would go over to the bathhouse, and they would have, and there's a medical facility over there, they would then prescribe the correct treatment. We had, eye washes, we had the sulfur baths. People claim if you soaked in the sulfur bath, it would, it would soak in through your skin, and it would do all sorts of healing processes. So
Does the place still exist?
it is. It's right across the street.
And it operates?
It is not in operation right now. That's.
I wanted to go.
Yeah, well, it's under construction or under renovation right now. So yeah,
it's going to reopen in the future then.
They're working on it. It's under renovation, and it's a pretty massive project. I feel good about this project when I go over there and look at their project, because this is in much better shape. And it's. But the issue with these hotels is, back in the day, they were all built on whiskey barrels filled with concrete.
No way.
On dirt. So over time, you can imagine the weight that there is in a building, a 5-story building. It started to sink into the ground. This particular hotel, and same way with the spa, started to sink. And it sunk so much that there's pictures. This used to be, the front porch used to be level with the ground. So it sunk 3 feet down into the ground. And this building had to be completely jacked up again. And so it went through 2 phases of that. The people that had it before I bought this in 2014.
Right.
And the people that had it before me went through the first raising and they brought it up as best they could. And then when I bought it, it had started to sink again. And so I had to raise it again. And you can only jack a building of this age up a ½ inch a day. So it took about 1.5 years to get it back. And in that process, a lot of the walls cracked, and that's what you have to be careful. These are all lath and plaster, and it's original. The moldings in here are they're not fake molding. It's the old plaster moldings, and so you have to be really careful. Unfortunately, we lost a section of the building, and I had to rebuild it, and that was the section where we had the restrooms. And what was unique about this, anybody that comes to see this always says, can we go see the bathrooms? And they're disappointed because it used to have 6-foot-tall urinals in the men's room. And they're very unique. I can show you some pictures of it. But as we started.
6 feet tall.
6 feet tall.
Considering
As tall as I am?
Considering that most people at the time were about 5'5".
That's right. That's right. Wow. This is one of only 2 hotels left. There's a couple that is still in good shape. The rest of them are, in really bad shape, or as some of them they've collapsed.
We saw the one. Is that what, the Empire?
Yeah, Empire.
Yeah, we saw that. That's a couple of years ago. I was here. It was standing.
Yes.
And then we just drove over a while ago and saw it collapse.
Yes, and that's what happens. I mean, the roof started to go. You'll have these absentee owners that'll buy them, and they just let them sit. And the roof started to go. Water got in. The main structural beams rotted. And one afternoon, this is funny about the Empire, because I was actually in another town at Home Depot, and I was shopping. A terrible storm during that time. And they asked all of the people to go into their restrooms because it was a tornado. So I went into the restroom, my phone rings, and it's a news reporter saying, There's a major hotel in Sharon Springs that just collapsed. Would you care to comment about it? And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, was it my hotel?
Oh, my God.
So well, fortunately it wasn't. It was the Empire Hotel, and yeah, it was a beautiful hotel. But at times, that particular hotel had stucco, but they put in colored glass into the stucco, so when the sun would hit it, it would just glimmer. It was really unique.
Yes, and coming back to what you said about guests bringing animals here, because that's very interesting to me. Where would the horses stay?
All of these hotels had livery stables. This particular hotel had a livery stable right out here.
Really?
They were self-contained. This was one of the few hotels that had its own gas generating plant. So it originally had gas lights, and so there was a gas generating plant. They generated their own gas here to light the lamps, and so they tried to be as self-contained as possible. There was a laundry facility in the back that they actually did all the laundry here on site. There was a building in the back and a big one on the back side here where the staff would stay. And so there's a building right now that houses or has 28 rooms, and all of the staff that would come here would stay. Now, this hotel was unique in that it had an owner from Florida. So he had a big hotel in Florida. And what he would do would be bring his entire staff from Florida. They would come up here in the summer and they would stay here and operate this hotel. Then they would close it down and move back to Florida and operate that one in the winter. But most of the hotels here, I don't know of any that weren't summer hotels, which means all the plumbing is on the outside of the building. There's no heat, no insulation. So it's terrible to heat. Most of these properties, it's all I heat in the winter is, this is a tea room right now. So I heat the kitchen, the tea room, and the front lobby. And that's the only part of this building I heat. And then I heat some of the wing over there, which is a private residence. So it's incredibly expensive because there's no insulation.
Where do you think Sharon Springs is, going now? I mean, it looks like, I guess the Beekman boys have moved into town, and you're having festivals. I think you have a performance place now, I think, that's being renovated.
Yes, we have.
What's the future of Sharon Springs?
Well, there's a lot of renovation that's going on. As we mentioned, the bathhouse is going on, undergoing renovation. There is a former hardware store called Clinkhart, the family that owned it, and it's gone through a lot of iterations. It was a hardware store. It burned down. Mr. Clinkhart was in the basement working, and he was doing some work. They had a lot of paint and kerosene, and he was doing some work with some kerosene. He had an oil lamp. It tipped over, caught the kerosene on fire, and the building caught fire. He ran out of the building, but his wife knew that the receipts from the store were in there. She ran back in the building and she died in the fire.
Oh,
yeah. So then it went from that to became a car dealership, and there's an elevator that used to bring the cars up and down to get them up to the floor, the show floor. The Clinkhart sold everything from, as I said, paint and it was like a hardware store. You could go there and buy a piano if you wanted. So it all had a wide range of merchandise that they sold. And then it became a movie theater, and it was very popular. And then now it's being renovated as an art center. So it's going to undergo a multi-million-dollar renovation. There's a foundation that has started, a nonprofit organization, and they're raising funds now to renovate that into a performing arts center. It went through, after the movie theater, there was Knights of Columbus, I think it was Knights of Columbus that came in and used it there. So there was a stage there, because it was a movie theater, all the seats are still there. So they're hoping to renovate that to be a performing arts center, and then also have community space upstairs. And so it's going to be a very nice facility, but it's going to take a lot of money and a lot of time. And, so there's a lot of things happening here in the way of renovation. And so we're hoping, once the spa is open, the spa was originally owned. You will actually be going over to the Stonehouse Mansion. That was owned by the Gardner family, Dr. John Gardner. And they also owned the spa, which was called the Imperial Baths. And that bathhouse actually operated up until, I think it was 2006. So, yeah.
Pretty recent. Yeah.
Yes, and but it was only operating in the summer when when the people would come, when the main population would come and stay. And then it sat empty for years. And so it wasn't until it was put up for sale, and there was a group of Koreans that came in, a group of Korean investors, and they bought several hotels, the Washington, the Adler, the Imperial, the Columbia, and some additional land. And it sat there for about 10 years and nothing happened. And so during that time, a lot of disrepair happened on, like for instance, the Washington Hotel, as I said, if a roof goes, that's what happens. And that collapsed into the street, just like the Empire Hotel. And so that had to be, demolished. And so there was a lot going on with that group and a lot of internal issues, some investment issues. And finally one man came to the top and bought it, and of that group of investors. And so he is now trying to renovate that. It's like a $10 million project just to renovate the spa. And his plan is to turn it into a Korean spa. No time frame on when it's going to be opened, because there's been delays. He owns a Korean bus company in New York City that brings tours to this area. And with the coronavirus now, everything has been kind of shut. His tourism business has been shut down completely. So it's really set them back as far as being able to work on this. Their plan will be to have the original sulfur baths, they'll go back and have that type of, but most of the waters are shut off now or have been capped off. They were available to the public, but during the renovations, everything has been capped off. So it's really kind of tough to get down. When you go down there, you can see the old gazebo and where the sulfur baths, and people used to drink the water, and that's. And there they would have the eye wash station where you could go and put that, but nothing is open now currently.
Can you drink the water right now?
Without trespassing?
Oh, no, it would be trespassing.
Yeah. It's private property, so it's not open to the public, not yet. But as part of the deal with the village, the Koreans have to have some of the water available to the public. So by the time they're done, they're working with the Historical Society to perhaps pipe water under the ground to the Historical Society, put some sort of fountain to where people could come and get the water from there.
Because you can do that in Saratoga. The other places that have these spas usually have them available for the public.
We did. It was available to the public until the renovations started. And then the problem is when you start renovations, you start getting a lot of trespassing and you get a lot of vandalism. And and that's again what has happened to a lot of these places that have been sitting vacant. The Adler Hotel, for instance, was a beautiful hotel, the last hotel that was built in Sharon Springs. And it sat vacant, and vandalism started to occur. They broke in. We were seeing that there was religious ceremonies that were going on, devil worshiping, all kinds of things that were. Yes.
Tell us about it.
So you can give us a tour of the Adler.
Yeah.
Why don't we do that? We'll go have a tour.
Okay.
Let's just come back to what you said. There was religious worshiping by the waters. Can you tell us about it?
Well, this is recently, though. I think that there's a group of people that like to go around and break in, and they hold religious ceremonies. And there's some evidence up there that there was religious ceremonies going on. The people would break in, and then they would do these devil worshiping religious kind of things. There's skulls and all kinds of stuff that are there. So yeah, it's unfortunate because even with this property, because it's a private property, I always have to keep the doors locked because one day I came and I was on the porch and I could hear my piano being played. And I thought, oh, what in the world? And I came in and two men had come in and I had left the back door. I was doing work in the ballroom and I'd left the ballroom door unlocked. They came in, sat down, just started playing the piano. And he said, oh, we thought you wouldn't mind.
So we found the history of Sharon Springs so interesting, we're going to stay a little longer and continue exploring.
But we will see you next time on
History on the Road.